Welcome back to AM Northwest. Our next guest grew up with psychic relatives, yet struggled to embrace her own psychic abilities until much later in life. Here to share her fascinating and inspiring story, we welcome the author of Cracked Open, Discovering the Unseen World, spiritual medium and psychotherapist, Kellee White. Good to have you with us, Kellee.
Hi, thank you, Helen.
What does the title mean, Cracked Open, Discovering the Unseen World?
Well, it literally means I was cracked open. I had a traumatic brain injury, so
Wow.
I actually was cracked open. And I started seeing, for lack of a better word, dead people everywhere.
Wow.
So I really was cracked open. And I think spiritually to be cracked open means to really start to embrace the other worldly things that go on earth. It's not just the day-to-day things that go on.
How did you experience the head trauma? What happened?
Well, it was the strangest thing. I was in the corporate world, and I was a single parent. So in the corporate world, you go, go, go. You know, hustle, hustle, hustle. And I'd done that for my whole life. I'd been in the corporate world. And I was a single parent. And my daughter, I'd just come back from Europe and Hong Kong. I was traveling all over the world. I didn't even know what time it was. You know, I was just so exhausted. Right. And my daughter said, "Mom, you have to take me to see Sting at the Greek Theater." We were from Los Angeles. And so I said, all right. I mean, I get into my car, and as I was getting into my car, I smashed my frontal lobe.
Oh, wow.
But I didn't realize it. I blacked out, and I felt a rush of blood, and I blacked out, but I thought, I'm a single parent. I can't emphasize that enough. And I was like,
I've got things to do.
I got things to do.
Right.
It's like, and so I said to my daughter, who was 15 at the time,
Uh-oh.
"Am I bleeding?"
Yeah.
After I kind of came to, and she goes, "No," because I wasn't bleeding externally.
Right.
What I didn't know is I was bleeding terribly in my brain, had a terrible brain bleed, but I didn't know it.
Yeah. But then you said you started experiencing seeing people who had already passed on.
Yeah, so I started slowing down what the head injury did, because I was in total denial that I was in a head injury.
Right.
Total denial.
Yeah.
And my behavior started to change. So one thing I can say about head injuries is that if you hit your head and your behavior starts to change, people need to take notice.
Right.
And so my whole career was based on me taking care of other people. I was a vice president of a large corporation. And so I was all about making sure people were comfortable and they were doing their job and those kind of things. But when this happened, I started raging. Like I could not control my rage.
Wow.
So this went on. And that's how we kind of discovered that I had changed so dramatically that something was the matter. And then after it started to slow down, my life started to slow down. I couldn't go as fast. I couldn't do things. And then I started seeing dead people.
Oh, wow.
Everywhere. So it was a huge shift in my life.
You grew up really with a very interesting family. Let's first though talk about your mom, because you and your mom were very close, right?
We were. My mother was my best friend, and my mother came from a small town. She was born in Alabama, and she ended up becoming the matron of Beverly Hills, which is where I'm from.
Yeah.
So it was a really interesting story. She ended up getting 2 masters and a PhD, very, very bright, but she never talked about her family dynamic, that her father, my grandfather, was actually a physical medium. And
he could lift tables.
He was what was called a table tipper. He would have his family all around, and there were 13 brothers and sisters, and he was the oldest. And he would say table dance, and the table would just lift and I mean, and my mother actually, when I found this out, I was like, "You forgot to tell me?"
Yeah, why? Like, how could you forget that?
She said, "Kellee, I swear to God,"
she
said, "I thought that people in every family did that because it was so common in my family." I said, "Come on.
Yeah.
There's no way you could forget something like that."
And you have other family members who are really interesting too.
Yeah, a lot of musicians in my family.
Yeah.
A lot of musicians, yes.
And then you've been, so when you work, you work with a lot of trauma, people who've been dealing with trauma. Although I think almost everybody's had a trauma in their life, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
How does being able to see people who've passed help? And tell me
gosh.
about maybe your favorite story of that.
Yeah, so let's see. So what happened is, for me, I started seeing dead people everywhere, and I had to figure out what was happening to me. Like, what is happening? My life changed. I no longer could be a corporate executive anymore. That ship sailed. As a matter of fact, that door completely slammed. And Spirit had another plan for me. And the plan for me really was to understand spirituality, to understand mediumship, to understand why souls come to Earth to begin with. And what happened was I started practicing mediumship. I started working with many people. They would come to me, and so I would start working as a medium. But then what I did is I realized that people were in great trauma, which I can talk about, you know, as a soul. Why do we come to Earth to begin with? Because there's so much trauma that's going to happen to so many people on Earth. But what happened is I knew that I was working with grief as a medium, and their loved ones are, you know, telling me what was going on and what happened and what the relationship was like. And I realized that I really should go back to grad school because I really wanted to become a psychotherapist to help with the grief along with the mediumship. So I did do that, and now I do both. I combine my mediumship skills and psychic ability with the grief work, grief counseling.
You've done some work too with James Van Praagh, right?
James, so this is a funny story with James. So when I first had my head injury, and we realized that I had a head injury because we didn't know at first what was going on.
And this is James here for those who,
James is amazing. He's one of my closest friends. When this happened, I said to my mom, I have to meet James Van Praagh. I have to meet James. Because he's the only one. And you have to understand, this was in the year 2002. And I had read his book in 1997, and my head injury was in 2000. So I said to my mom, I have to meet James. And so she said, well, you know, my mother was known as the shrink to the stars. So she said, well, you know, I have this person and this celebrity, and they'll introduce us. And they did.
Wow.
And we got introduced to, I got introduced to James, and we were never apart once we met.
Wow.
So we become closest of friends, and we actually have a show every Monday night called Life After Death and Beyond.
I love it. I love it. You have a book event tonight.
I do.
And that's at Renaissance Bookshop in Portland. It's from 5 to 7. We're going to put all that information for everyone on our website at k2.com. We want to tell everybody, Cracked Open, Discovering the Unseen World. Kellee White, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I wish we had like a whole show to sit down and talk to you about this. This would have been fun.
Me too.
All right, we'll be right back with more AM Northwest. Don't go away.